Welcome to Bada Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edges of extinction. We'll share species research, information, and conservation proposals, and then we'll spend part of the show opening a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a soundscape of gentleness, of reflection, of delight, and maybe of grieving. Without conservation activity and significant societal shift, many of these species may not survive the 21st century. And so perhaps we might acknowledge their journey with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the Fiji Crested Iguana. The Fiji Crested Iguana is a critically endangered reptile, native to roughly 8 islands in the Fijian archipelago in the South Pacific Ocean. Its scientific name is Brachylophus vitiensis. The Fiji Crested Iguana is a large, stocky, long-tailed lizard that can reach lengths up to 30 inches. It's mostly tail. That's roughly 10 inches of body and 20 inches of tail. They weigh roughly 3/4 of a pound. Their scales are a bright emerald green, with 3 narrow, creamy to white bands that run vertically along their sides. And scales are small and granular, giving their skin a rough, kind of pixelated texture. As suggested by their name, they have a spiny crest that extends along their back from the nape of the neck to the base of the tail. This is a dense row of elongated, pointy, modified scales that can grow up to 1/2 inch in length. The crest is thought to be a defensive adaptation. So, though it's not as formidable as, say, the spines of a porcupine, the iguana's crest may make it harder for predators to grip it and to consume it. The crest is also a visual deterrent, making the iguana seem larger and more threatening to potential predators. The Fiji Crested Iguana is quadrupedal, meaning it moves on all 4 limbs. They have long, slender toes, 5 per foot, each ending in sharp claws. They have a slightly elongated snout with 2 large, bright yellow nostrils at the tip. Their eyes are also large, with a golden or reddish iris and a deep black pupil. Near the hinge of the jaw on both sides of the head is an oval-shaped tympanum. This is their external ear opening. It's a thin, unscaled, skin-like membrane through which sound waves can pass, allowing them to hear. A fleshy dewlap hangs beneath the chin. A dewlap is a piece of loose, elastic skin that the iguana uses in displays of courtship or aggression. So specialized musculature allows the iguana to extend or fan out the dewlap to make themselves appear larger and more intimidating. The Fiji Crested Iguana can also change its scale color from green to nearly black when threatened. This adaptation allows the iguana to blend in with its surroundings as camouflage, also to startle potential predators, and to menace potential rivals. The iguana synthesizes additional melanin. This is the same chemical compound we find in human hair and skin. And so with the iguana, more melanin results in darker scale pigmentation. Fijian iguanas, including our Fiji Crested Iguana, are the most geographically isolated iguana in the world. Their closest relatives are found in South America. DNA and fossil evidence suggest that the Fijian iguanas diverged from the Americas branch of the iguana family roughly 35 million years ago. So, how did they end up in the South Pacific? One proposed hypothesis is that modern Fijian iguanas descended from a widespread but now extinct lineage, so a shared ancestor with the iguanas of the Americas from perhaps 40 to 60 million years ago. However, no evidence of this lineage, living or in the fossil record, has been found. And so the more widely accepted hypothesis is that they rafted, making a roughly 7,000-mile transoceanic journey from the Americas to the South Pacific on driftwood or on buoyant, tangled plant masses. Imagine vegetation uprooted by a storm floating out on the sea. And of course, we are not talking about a single iguana. A single iguana cannot reproduce. And even a breeding pair gets genetically messy pretty quickly, and so this is likely a small population making this epic trip. I do want to stress that it is unlikely that this is intentional in any way. This was not a migration. We should not imagine iguana, say, seeking a new food source by adventuring on driftwood. It is surely accident or calamity that finds this population swept to sea. And then it is mostly wild good luck that they survive the trip at all and eventually find land in Fiji. The Pacific is big, and there is not much land, fresh water, or food between, say, Peru and Fiji. So luck plays a role, and there are a few more tangible factors on their side. First, the South Equatorial Current. This is a broad, westward flowing current that crosses the Pacific, which could have provided potential propulsion for the rafting iguana to reach Fiji. Other promising considerations are physiological. Iguana have a relatively low metabolic rate and can survive for extended periods without food or fresh water. They have a higher tolerance for saltwater exposure than many terrestrial animals, and they are relatively long-lived, with lifespans of up to 15 years. Additionally, they have very long reproductive cycles, only breeding and birthing once every 2 years. So I did a little back-of-the-envelope math on this. The Pacific South Equatorial Current flows at the surface on average roughly half a mile per hour. And if we call this a 7,000-mile journey, under ideal conditions, with steady current flow and no drifting or meandering, we're looking at about 1 year and 7 months to make this trip. Listeners, please note this is a totally speculative number based on rough estimate and presumption. I'm just wanting to get a sense of this journey, and obviously it's a really big trip, but 1 year and 7 months feels plausible. And one last point here. This really only has to happen once. A small population makes it to a super lush island with no predators, and it thrives and evolves. And there are tens of millions of years over which this might have happened. So, however improbable rafting iguana sounds at first, it is our leading hypothesis, and when we talk it through, it feels plausible. In the dream, to drift the seas unwitting. In the dream, to be truly lost, all horizons unfamiliar. In the dream, a feral despairing, a long aching thirst, a monotony of blue. And then green land, a new home in the dream. Fiji Crested Iguana are diurnal and arboreal, so meaning they are active during the day and spend most of their time in the treetops, in the forest canopy. Their long toes, claws, and tail are adapted for climbing. And they move through the foliage, foraging for food and basking in sunny patches to regulate their body temperature, as they are cold-blooded. They even sleep in the trees. Fiji Crested Iguana are herbivorous. They eat leaves, buds, flowers, and fruit from a range of forest plants, including the savua tree, the karanja tree, passion fruit, and they show a preference for the sweet hibiscus flowers of the vau tree. They are primarily solitary and can be territorial, particularly during the breeding season, defending their home range from potential rivals. Using visual displays such as head bobs, dewlap extensions, and scale color change, as well as pheromonal chemical signals used to mark their territories. These communications establish dominance over other Fiji crested iguana and are used to attract mates. Mating season peaks in March and April. Copulation occurs in the trees, and then the female makes a rare trek to the ground for egg laying. Using her clawed forelimbs, she digs a burrow in the forest floor, just slightly larger than the size of her body, into which she lays a clutch of 2 to 4 eggs. She then fills in the nest with loose soil, closing off the entrance and packing dirt in with her forelimbs and her snout. She then camouflages the nest by kicking debris, stones, and leaf litter over the top. A 2009 study reports that, quote, completed nest sites were virtually indistinguishable from the surrounding forest floor, end quote. The female returns to the treetops, and then the eggs will incubate underground for up to 9 months, which is quite long for reptile species. The eggs hatch in October, November, December, and the hatchlings are precocial, meaning they are well-developed and independent from birth, emerging from the eggs able to walk, climb, forage, and avoid predators. There is no parental care of the young. The young are like miniature versions of the adults, measuring roughly 5 inches in length. And they grow slowly, not reaching reproductive maturity until 3 to 5 years of age. And the species can live up to 15 years old. The Fiji crested iguana is native to the Fiji Islands in the South Pacific Ocean. Specifically, roughly 8 of the western islands of the archipelago, including Yaduataba, Makuata, and Malololivu. These islands formed where the Pacific Plate subducts beneath the Australian Plate. So subduction occurs where 2 tectonic plates meet, and one plate slides beneath the other, pressed downward into the Earth's mantle. That's the layer beneath the crust. And as the subducting plate descends into the mantle, increasing temperature and pressure buildup leads to magma release causing volcanic eruptions, and over time, these volcanic eruptions build up layers of cooled lava, eventually forming the islands that we see today. The Fijian Islands evidence this volcanic history marked by rugged mountains, craters of both dormant and active volcanoes, hot springs, and still have occasional earthquakes. We find our Fiji crested iguana in the trees of the island's dry forests. These are deciduous forests. Unlike the evergreen forests found in other parts of the archipelago, many of the trees in the dry forest shed their leaves during the dry season, which typically lasts from May to October. Temps in this cooler dry season average in the mid-70s Fahrenheit, while temps in the wet season, so that's November to April, average in the 80s. The region receives roughly 70 inches of rainfall per year, of course most of it falling during the wet season, and the contrast is striking. So for comparison, March can see up to 15 inches of rainfall, while July may see less than 1 inch. The Fiji crested iguana shares its island home with orange dove, passion fruit, Fiji stick insect, orchid, dekua, Pacific swallow, vow, koaloa, red-vented bulbul, Fiji banded iguana, sandalwood, karanja, red-throated lorikeet, coconut crab, limeberry, Fijian monkey-faced bat, savua, Pacific boa, green turtle, collared lory, yakata, morning gecko, Fiji land snail, guava, Fijian swallowtail, and many, many more. The Fiji crested iguana population is threatened by deforestation, resulting in habitat loss and degradation. So, significant patches of healthy dry forest are now rare in Fiji, following decades of burning, clearing for agriculture, overgrazing by human-introduced goats, by the spread of invasive species, and by human development, expansion of infrastructure, and tourism. Additionally, human-introduced predators, such as feral cats and rats, prey on the iguana, especially juveniles and eggs, which is particularly damaging for a species like the Fiji crested iguana, who has long reproductive cycles. And human-induced climate change is an emerging threat. Rising sea levels and increased frequency of extreme weather events, such as cyclones, can inundate nesting sites and damage critical habitat. Changes in temperature and rainfall patterns will also affect food availability and disrupt the ecological balance of the dry forest biome. Fortunately, there have been substantial conservation efforts to protect the Fiji crested iguana, with some marked successes. The National Trust of Fiji has established the entirety of Yaduataba Island as a protected reserve. They've eradicated invasive goat species and reintroduced native plants to help restore the iguana's habitat. The island is totally off limits to the public, and visits require permitting, granted strictly for scientific and conservation purposes. A partnership initiated between a private resort owner and the Fijian government on the island of Malolo is also exploring dry forest restoration, including an experimental nursery dedicated to cultivating saplings of native species, which are then intended to reforest sections of the island, creating natural iguana habitat. The program is also working to remove non-native predators, the feral cats and dogs and rats. A captive breeding and reintroduction program has had success hatching iguana eggs in captivity, and researchers report increased sightings of iguana in their natural habitat. Nevertheless, the Fiji Crested Iguana has been considered critically endangered on the IUCN Red List since 1996, and their population is currently in decline. Our most recent counts estimate less than 14,000 Fiji Crested Iguana remain in the wild. Information for today's show about the Fiji Crested Iguana was compiled from the Australian Journal of Zoology, Volume 55, from Ecology and Evolution, Volume 11, Number 9, from the journal Iguana, Volume 11, Number 4, from the IUCN, from the Journal of Herpetology, Volume 15, Number 3, from the National Trust of Fiji Islands, from the journal Oryx, Volume 41, from Pacific Conservation Biology, Volume 15, from Pacific Science, Volume 63, Number 2, from PLOS 1, from the Proceedings of the International Conference on Island Invasives, 2017, from Reptiles and Amphibians, Volume 29, Number 1, and from Wikipedia. For more information about Fiji Crested Iguana conservation, please see the National Trust of Fiji Islands at nationaltrust.org.fj. So in a moment, I would like to perform some music in hopes of holding space to be in contemplation of the other lives with whom we share our earth. Do not intend this music to put meaning upon or extract meaning from the Fiji Crested Iguana. Instead, I want this music to simply express my human awe for other life. And so I will pause in a space of sound and reflection, and I warmly invite you to join me. honor the life force of the Fiji Crested Iguana. I will commit its human name to my record. I am grateful to have shared time on our planet with this amazing being. And I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. I grieve. And so in the name of the Fiji Crested Iguana, I pledge to reduce my consumption, my carbon footprint, and my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and my inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of plant and animal kin and their habitat by individuals, corporations, and governments. I forever pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bada Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin.